Nigel Farage's decision to stand for Clacton is a game changer. He and Richard Tice seem to think that it's going to turn the Conservatives from being the party of opposition to being the third party, and that Reform will get huge numbers of votes because of Farage's standing. Of course, Farage, do remember, Farage is taking somebody else's candidature. There was already a Reform candidate standing in Clacton, and Farage pushed him to one side. He says, well, he already knew this. He'd known this for months, that this was a possibility, not a probability, a possibility. What Farage's campaign and candidacy does is to draw considerable attention to Clacton, to himself, to Reform, and his prominence as a confident speaker about one thing only, but a confident speaker whose moves are closely watched will elevate the profile of the Reform Party nationally, will mean that the Reform Party is involved in those big set-piece debates on television. Farage is known for his strong beliefs about Brexit, about immigration, about economic reform, about banking. His campaign could well shift the focus of the general election to these topics, reducing the set agendum that's already there, which is the NHS, which is oil and gas, and so on. It's also going to split the Conservative vote. That's a given now. So the Conservatives were, I think, trying to shore up their own votes and to ensure that this defeat was not going to be as catastrophic as they thought, and their target was to focus on reform. I know this because I've been told by people, campaign managers and so on, that they've been told by Conservative central headquarters that they must target Reform voters, go round ringing on the doorbells of identified Reform voters. Stupid, really. Utterly stupid. The people they should be focusing on are the One Nation Tories, are the Blue Rinse Brigade. I don't know whether anybody has a blue rinse anymore. Mrs. Slocum is old hat, isn't she? Literally. But Clacton is a traditional Conservative seat. If Farage is successful there, and he splits the right-wing vote in his favour, not only will it be more challenging for the Conservatives to hold that seat, and not only will it benefit Labour and the other opposition parties, but it will have a knock-on effect across the country. It puts pressure on the Conservative Party to address the issues that Farage emphasises, particularly if he gains traction, which I have no doubt at all he will. Because at the moment, Starmer is never going to light your fire, is it? Is he? He's never going to do it. Farage will. And Sunak is like a lost poodle most of the time. You think, oh, poor boy, and then you realise he's messed up our economy. He was responsible for so much that was going on while Boris was in control. He's not as innocent as he looks. And what are the goals now? So, the first goal, Reform Party, it doesn't have a presence in the chamber of the House of Commons, and its support base is small, but its poll gain is significant, given the fact that it's starting from such a small base. It's already neck and neck with the Liberals, if not ahead. And it's inching up. This is an extraordinary thing. It's inching up on the Conservative polls. on the percentage of votes the Conservatives are expecting to take. Now, of course, because the first past the post system, that doesn't mean it will translate into seats. And it's difficult for smaller parties to gain significant representation unless they have concentrated support in specific constituencies and with a specific focus. So the problem with reform is that its vote is spread evenly, like Marmite, rather than like a sort of chunky marmalade sandwich. It's Marmite smeared, like when you see a sandwich smeared in Marmite, you must doubt for a few minutes what it is. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who will look at Farage and wonder if this is a fecal moment. Farage has personal popularity. He has a dedicated following. He is a skilled campaigner. He is a spectacular speaker. And that personal popularity could well trigger an earthquake in British politics. This is, I think, and the timing is so brilliant because it's just before the point at which the doors close on candidates. It's just before the general election proper. So far, we've had a week, just over a week, of phony election. Now we're getting into the real thing, and Farage has taken the initiative away from everybody else. Now, if reform were to perform well in other constituencies as well as Clacton, it could well have an unexpected result and a more fragmented parliament. It could have this. It could produce a sort of parliament that actually leads to a change in voting, proportional representation. Now, many people who do not support Farage would support that. As for the impact on the Conservative leadership, well, an increased reform vote in Conservative areas may well reduce the margin of success to the point where there is no success. So this will have a shattering impact on those few remaining semi-safe seats in the Conservative heartlands. We're thinking of Richmond, for example, Rishi Sunak's seat. We're certainly thinking of, is it Godalming, Jeremy Hunt's seat. And this might prompt, in the next day or so, it might prompt other Conservatives to leap out of their present position and go and join Reform or something. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen. And it intensifies the discourse around immigration, sovereignty, and reform, economic reform, social reform, but not, I think, about the cost of living. It will polarize voters further, leading to more pronounced divisions in the electorate. And the prospect of Reform becoming the main opposition party is highly ambitious and unlikely in the short term. But I predict that the Conservative Party will fracture in the weeks immediately following its defeat, and the Tufton Road lot will combine with whatever is in the Reform Party. The Reform Party will become, quote, the Conservative Party, and it will then remain for the One Nation caucus, that group, to decide, do they want to belong to this right-wing babble, or do they want to migrate perhaps to the Lib Dems, or even change their name completely. This will, Nigel Farage's entry into this election at this stage, maybe a week ago, it wouldn't have had such a dramatic effect. His dramatic timing is spectacular. It's like in modern pantomimes, there's a tendency to introduce King Rat before the show really starts. What a foolish thing to do. King Rat should be introduced a little later. I remember there was a wonderful pantomime in Birmingham a few years ago, and King Rat had a queen who was Joan Collins. King Rat with Nigel Havers, and I think they were both introduced a little bit later. And Joan Collins had the most sensational entry, but not before the show had got started and we were warmed up and ready to squeal with delight when she popped out. And that's what has happened with Nigel Farage. He's kept us waiting, and he's chosen his time. And he is well aware of the volcanic shifts in political landscape that he is triggering, especially if he and his appearance, now influences the strategies and the policies of the other parties.